Alphaman, developing and releasing a post-apocalyptic roguelike game in the DOS days when computers were slow, memory was scarce, and no one had ever heard of object-oriented code. Well, Jeff, welcome to the celebration.
Thanks very much, Christy. And this roguelike celebration has been really great. And it's been a fantastic experience so far. I've loved the NetHack fireside this morning. Loved the music talks especially, but it's been really great. So as Christy said, I'm going to talk about my roguelike game Alphaman. But I want to start off by acknowledging John Harris. A couple years ago, John published a two-part article on Alphaman, and his article includes a lot more detail on the gameplay than I have time to present today. It was also John that told me about this roguelike celebration and encouraged me to submit a proposal. So I'm here because of John. John does have a book for sale on the history of early roguelike games, and you can find a link on the obelisk. I also include all the links in this talk I've already posted on the obelisk as well, so you can find them there. So what is Alphaman? Well, it's a relatively early roguelike. I released it in 1995, although I started it in the 80s. It's science fiction theme rather than swords and sorcery, and it was based heavily on a couple of paper and pencil role-playing games that Jim Ward developed, Gamma World and Metamorphosis Alpha. In fact, the name Alphaman came from Metamorphosis Alpha. And as a fun little aside, I had pizza with Jim Ward at the Gen Con Wargamers Convention in Geneva, Wisconsin in 1980. From the start, Alphaman had an intentionally humorous nature. I didn't originally intend to release it, and that happened years later. And I wanted the game to look beautiful with colored ASCII characters. And this view in the lower right there is the top-down look at this two-dimensional world. And I know it doesn't look like much, but compared to the kind of prison gray of most of the roguelikes, this was positively stunning. A disclaimer, every one of you is a better programmer than I was back then. My coding style was really spaghetti code at its worst, and the coding tools that I had really made that even worse. There really wasn't object-oriented coding tools at that time. Nothing event-driven as well, as far as at least in terms of the PC that I used. And so Alphaman ran on the Microsoft DOS platform only. There was no mouse, there was no sound, no music, but pretty basic stuff. And so these pictures are meant to represent modern roguelike games. So, beautiful, sleek, highly engineered, and this represents Alphaman. So with none of the style or power of today's games, or even the best games that were available when Alphaman was released. But I would argue that this has a certain charm to it, and that's really why I'm here today to give this talk. So who was I when I started writing Alphaman? Well, I was in my mid-20s. I was working on a physics PhD at Cornell University, and truth be told, I included that picture on the last slide in an unsuccessful attempt to try to make this picture look a little bit less dorky. Spam was included in Alphaman as a food, and as another fun aside, I measured the thermal conductivity of Spam and published it in 1993. And as far as I know, that was the only piece of canned meat that was ever cooled to 50 thousandths of a degree above absolute zero. I loved to program. I got my first personal computer in the mid 80s after finishing college. And during graduate school, I really needed stress relief and a creative outlet, and that came from creating my own world. I didn't have a whole lot of free time because of all my other activities, and so because of that, Alphaman was 7 years in the making before I finally released it. So I want to put Alphaman in the context of other early roguelikes. So I found this graphic when I was doing some research for this talk. I was inspired to code Alphaman after playing Rogue. I wasn't aware of any other science fiction roguelikes, but I knew about a lot of these games from the news group rec.games.roguelike. So I knew about NetHack and Ragnarok and Moria and Larn and Adom and Angband. Here's Alphaman, influenced by no other games and influencing none. This was maybe a little sobering when I saw it, but it's really not surprising. It was the only science fiction game in the group, and because I really didn't have time to play all those other games, even though I read about them on the news group, I think my user interface was significantly different from the other games. So I think it's no surprise that I didn't influence any games that came later. So what was it like programming back then? Well, I started in 1988. I had an IBM XT computer. It had a big 10 megabyte hard drive and Microsoft's disk operating system. The monitor in ASCII color mode was 80 characters across and 25 up and down with 16 colors. I used Microsoft's QuickBasic compiler at the start of when I started coding. At the start, I wanted Alphaman to fit on a single 5¼ inch floppy disk because I envisioned sending these through the mail to my friends, and I wanted it playable on the slowest IBM computer in those days, which was a 8088 processor with no math coprocessor. Because the math coprocessor was a pretty expensive add-on, like $800 or $900 if I remember right. By the time I released Alphaman in 1995, Windows 95 was already out, and you could play Alphaman in a Windows 95 console, but nowadays it generally requires DOSBox or something similar. A little bit about the Alphaman characters. The characters were randomly generated. The player had no options for assigning points for stats or for mutations, things like that. They were typical 3d6 Dungeons and Dragons style stats with the specific statistics taken from Metamorphosis Alpha. Every character had one physical and one mental mutation. Couple of regrets. Intelligence was really pretty irrelevant, and if I had eliminated it, I would have had one more line in the character box in order for to include something more interesting, like possibly picking up a third mutation or a mutational defect down the road. Another regret, berries had to be identified like potions, and if you had identified a berry, it would just put a little asterisk next to it, and you had to go to another page of identified items to see what it was. And I should have just changed the name on the screen, so kind of a duh moment. As an Easter egg, if you put Jeffrey Olson as your character name, you got the highest stats and good starting items. And this was kind of my narcissistic way to try to insinuate myself at the top of everyone's leaderboards. This would be funny if narcissism hadn't become so poisonous in this country. It's interesting that this manifestation of Jeffrey Olson was killed by overeating, and I hope that's not a harbinger of things to come. So the character mutations, more than anything, defined an Alphaman character. They were a little bit like your class in NetHack or something like that. So on the right there's the list of the 17 physical mutations and the 13 mental mutations that were part of Alphaman. Most of these were modified versions of mutations that were included in Gamma World. Another regret, tentacles was misspelled throughout Alphaman. And it's a good thing that there was no autocorrect back then, because this had a 50% chance of going horribly wrong. Some of these mutations you would use, like Sonic Attack or Life Leech. Some of them were always on, like Tough Exoskeleton or Military Genius, and then some were both, like Quills or Heightened Willpower. So for example, your Quills would protect you, and if a creature hit you with a physical attack, they would take some damage, but you could also shoot them periodically as a ranged weapon. In terms of items, there were, weapons and armor, of course. The fun items, there were mutated berries, which really took the place of potions from the swords and sorcery style games. Berries differed from potions. They had varying degrees of ripeness from red up through violet. And more ripe was more powerful. And in some cases, the red and the violet berries would give you a permanent effect, like a berry that changed your dexterity. A violet one would typically raise it, and a red one would typically lower it permanently, whereas the other ones would be temporary. A lot of berries could be eaten or thrown, so if a berry caused blindness, you could eat it and it would blind you, or you could hit a creature with it and it would blind the creature. Berries would ripen over time fairly slowly, but there was a tech device that could ripen them quickly, so there were ways to push your stats up pretty quickly if you found the right berries. The other type of fun items were the tech devices. These really replaced magic items. So naturally there were tech weapons like laser pistols and missile launchers and things like that. Some of the tech devices were powerful, like force field generator and transmogrifier. Some of them were dubious, like the Tip O'Neill mask. While you wore the Tip O'Neill mask, you were blinded, but creatures around you would run away. I'm not quite sure what I had against the Speaker of the House during the Reagan administration, but apparently I thought he was an unattractive guy. Some of the devices were genuinely harmful, like the Kevorkian machine, which is named after the assisted suicide doctor. And then there were a whole bunch of useless items as well that just didn't do anything. In terms of gameplay, the top figure on the right there sort of shows what I call the main map. This is the map of the world, and then with the character details to the right of that. And so it's in the Finger Lakes of New York, which is where I was in graduate school. So a couple of lakes in the corners and some woods in the middle. And one square on that main map corresponded to a local terrain map that's shown down on the bottom. And because of memory limitations, I wasn't able to store all those local maps. So if you left a local terrain map and came back, I would regenerate the local map based on a specific random number seed based on where you were in the main map. Um, uh, there was a game overview within the game that was provided by tape recorders. I'll talk a little bit more about the game overview in the next slide. But you'd find a couple of tape recorders, tech devices at the start of the game. One would kind of give the overall mission, and the next would give you a suggested main castle to start in. And these tape recorders were kind of an homage to the old Mission Impossible television show, where Peter Graves would start off each episode, finding a tape recorder where he and his team of spies would find their impossible mission for that week's episode. Um, you would generally move around the local terrain map. The monsters were all upper and lowercase letters of varying colors. You'd pick up items. This particular screen was pretty good. There's a yellow small tech device, a blue weapon, and a cyan shield. And usually you'd clear a screen of monsters before you move on. Otherwise, you'd get a cloud of creatures following you from one square to the next because the game wouldn't forget them as you moved from one local map to the next. Another regret, my monster AI really was embarrassingly simplistic. If there was one thing I could change about Alphaman, would be to go back and work on the AI a little more, to have a little bit more variation among different creatures to make them feel a little different. I mean, it's the thing I look back on and kind of wish I had done differently. A little bit more on gameplay. Alphaman included food and fatigue and sleep. I really only included food because I found spam and beefaroni to be amusing foods. It was possible to starve to death in 8 hours, so apparently your mutations used a lot of calories. Fatigue was also an issue if you were carrying heavy items. You'd have to rest because if you were fatigued, your strength and your dexterity were lower. And it was necessary to sleep at night. Partly, if you were outside at night, your field of visibility would decrease slowly over time until in the dead of night you could only see the squares immediately adjacent to you. But I also included the sleep pattern just as a reminder to characters that they had a 1 week time period to complete their mission. So it was easy to find places to sleep at night. There were castles and ruins and lairs. The overall mission was to defeat the Grinch within a week. He was going to release a deadly nerve toxin, and you had to visit these 5 special main castles in order to do that. You could complete them in any order, but the tape recorders provided a suggested order for how to finish them. There were also random ruins and lairs as well. There's a ruins up on the top where the characters apparently mapped out the whole ruins level and is in a room with a stairway going up and another one going down. Lairs were kind of fun. They were good places to find stuff. So they're in the center of that lair, there are 3 small tech devices, the yellow things. There are 3 red berries, a cyan large tech device, and a can of beefaroni. So the other thing that kind of made the lairs fun is that every creature in the lair was the same type. So if it happened to be something you were really good against, you could just waltz in and get all the good stuff. So in terms of the main castles, the first 4, you had to get a pair of blue suede shoes from Elvis because there was a bottomless chasm around the Grinch's castle. You had to get rid of a bunch of Elvis impersonators before he'd give you the blue suede shoes. You had to visit 1313 Mockingbird Lane, which is the home of the Munsters. That was a very popular television show back in the early 1960s. Grandpa Munster had a map that showed the location of the Grinch's invisible stronghold. Grandpa was really annoying. If he hit you, he turned you into a bat and you would reappear someplace at random on the level, and all of your items were scattered across the level, so it was a real pain. You also needed to get a radiation suit from Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon, because the Grinch's castle was in a radiation zone, and you needed Gilligan's Keptobora serum to protect you from nerve toxin that permeated the castle. Gilligan's Island was a popular television show in the late 1960s, and Gilligan was also really annoying. Every turn, basically, he would break one of your items, which wasn't fun if he broke your titanium sword or your duralloy plate mail. Both Grandpa and Gilligan were pretty easy to defeat if you knew the right secret, though. The fifth castle, was, hold on, sorry. Fifth castle was Trump Casino. And in order to get in the Grinch's castle, you needed to get Trump's presidential ID card. I'd point out that Alphaman was released 5 years before the infamous Simpsons episode where Lisa in the future makes a reference to President Trump. So this may make Alphaman the earliest prediction of the Trump presidency. Another regret, the D representing Donald should have been orange in color, although, as one of my friends said after I gave a practice talk for him, that he really wasn't orange back then. While you were in Trump Casino, all the creatures had the Trump name appended to the front, so this character just got attacked by a Trump defense droid. And along the way, he found a Trump incendiary grenade, a Trump radar detector, and a Trump prosthetic leg. The final castle was the Grinch's stronghold. As I said, it was the stronghold was invisible. It was in a radiation zone. There was toxic gas, and the Grinch himself was extremely well protected. But winning the game required some thought and not just some really good tech weapons. So Alphaman had 3 different kinds of computers in it, and they had clues about each of the castles, including this one about the Grinches, that the Grinch has a soft spot for roast beast. So I want to talk a little bit about the progression during the development of Alphaman. So as I said before, I started in 1988, and I was really just playing around creating the first main map, playing with the colors, getting a feel for the ASCII characters, and starting to think of what kind of data arrays I would need. Really early on, I started to run into string variable issues with QuickBasic. So I had to create my own makeshift string handler. It was really clumsy, grabbing strings from a separate text file. It's probably the ugliest part of all of the ugly Alphaman coding. I also learned pretty early on that if you didn't have that math coprocessor, some things were really slow. And so I learned, I got rid of all my sines and cosines. I went to integer multiplications when I needed to, and when I could, I went to bit shifts to speed up some of the math calculations. QuickBasic also had a lot of code size bloat. It was not compact executable code, and it quickly became too big to fit on a 5¼ inch floppy. Fortunately, the 3½ inch diskettes came out, which had more than twice the memory. But by that time, I had already started adding modules that were compiled in QuickC, because QuickC made more compact code. It worked well with QuickBasic, and QuickC allowed embedding assembly code as well, which really helped the size and speed in a few key places as well. I think I was working on Alphaman for about 4 years before I decided I wanted to actually release it as shareware. It was what I would call traditional shareware. I didn't limit. You could play it as much as you want. I just said, if you like it, consider sending me some money. And ultimately, I had about 30 paid registrations, which, as I say here, put my effective hourly wage well below that of a Victorian-era child laborer. But I have zero bitterness about this. I was not doing this as a money-making endeavor. I really wish I had done what the ADOM guy did, which is he said, if you like this game, send me a postcard from where you are, because I was really a lot more interested in meeting people than I was in getting $15 from them. So I had help along the way. I had a couple of play testers that played Alphaman a lot. Both of them were former roommates of mine at the University of Illinois. Greg Kroll was invaluable and extremely clever. He would try all of those really hard, challenging, weird things, like he'd use his molecular disruption mental mutation on his backpack to see if it would disintegrate the things inside the backpack. And I'm sure that he crashed DOS with stack overflows and things like that many times, because he would try all the really weird things. My other playtester was Peter Jessup. He was also invaluable. He gave me a lot of good ideas for things to add to the game. He was a struggling actor, fresh out of college. He had a really slow computer. He had no hard drive, no math coprocessor when he started. I did eventually upgrade my computer, and so I visited him in Chicago, and I installed my math coprocessor in his computer, and I installed my hard drive as well, although he didn't have a slot for the hard drive, so we had to run the ribbon cable out the back, and the hard drive lived in a shoebox. As a plug, Peter now does video game voiceover work, including some parts in some big games like Resident Evil, Fallout 4, Skyrim, Mass Effect, and at least a dozen others. His IMBD link is here, IMDb link. I also put it on the obelisk. And he's available for your game if you want a professional voiceover guy. He's really good. He's a super nice guy as well. I'm going to give my email at the end of this talk, and you can reach out to me and I can put you in touch with Peter if you'd like to have a really good voiceover guy. I do have a few recommendations for coders. So these are probably stupid and out of date, but first of all, if possible, do it for your own enjoyment, because if you do that, then your time is never going to be wasted. If you can, try to do something no one else has done before, just because that's where your creativity is really going to be able to come out. Use as many playtesters as you can get and accept their criticisms and embrace their good ideas. And then look for anything in your game that you dislike and change it so that you do like it. I'll add a comment here that completing and releasing a complex game had some similarities to completing a PhD thesis. Partly it's all those loose ends and all the little details that the last 10% takes as long as the first 90%. And I would also argue that the mental skills that I developed and learned while juggling all those details in my head and on paper really have translated into real job skills as well. So there's been a sort of a recent Alphaman mini resurgence, or maybe micro resurgence is more accurate. My son came across a YouTube video of someone taking an Alphaman break in 2015. This was a good 10 or 15 years after I thought Alphaman had disappeared without a trace. And astonishingly, the guy in the video, he never used his mutations, he never figured out a tech device, he never ate a mutated berry. Basically, he never did any of the things that I thought made Alphaman fun. More recently, 2 or 3 years ago, Jamie Bainbridge managed to track me down by my current work email. I don't know how he did it, but the CompuServe email that I had embedded within Alphaman was long gone. And I gave Jamie my source code, and he astonishingly managed to recompile it. And so he released my source code on GitHub with my blessing. So if you want to see my spaghetti Frankenstein code and all its horror, you can find it there on GitHub. That link is on the obelisk as well. I've already acknowledged John Harris and his encouragement to give this talk. There have been some Alphaman discussions on the Roguelike dev subreddit. I found some comments on fandom.com, and then while I was researching this talk, I found a way to play online that did not need DOSBox, although it was really slow, especially when you go from one local train map to the next. So maybe they don't have a math coprocessor. So who am I now that nearly 30 years has passed since Alphaman? Well, I've been married for 30 years. I have 3 children. I play soccer twice a week for fun and for stress relief, and I play trombone for fun and as a creative outlet. And these 2 activities kind of fill the role that coding Alphaman did for me during graduate school. And in this picture here, I managed to combine the 2 together, where we're having a barbecue after soccer on Stanford University campus, and I think we're playing Sweet Home Alabama or Hotel California or something like that. I also have a job. I'm a scientist at Lockheed Martin Space in Palo Alto, California. Mainly, I develop devices called cryocoolers that cool science instruments on spacecraft. So, for example, that device in the top middle in my coworker's hands is a cryocooler that's going to fly to Jupiter on NASA's Europa Clipper mission. It's cooling an infrared spectrometer that will determine what chemicals are present on the surfaces of Jupiter's icy moons. There's a similar cryocooler built into that lunar instrument there on the right. You can see the same components on the left side of that instrument. And I'm pleased to say that we just launched one of these on NASA's Psyche mission. It launched on October 13th, and it's going to visit Psyche, which is the largest metallic body in the solar system. I'm also really proud to have helped test NIRCam, which is the primary camera on the James Webb Space Telescope, and it's sending back beautiful photos from the L2 Lagrange point in deep space. So I'd like to end with a variation on Isaac Newton's famous quotation, "If I have not seen as far as others, it's because giants are standing on my shoulders." So one thing that I was gratifying reading some of the Reddit comments and other things online are people that said, "Oh, I remember that wacky game Alphaman. It got me into roguelikes back years ago." And I hope that maybe some of you that are working on your own games had encountered Alphaman along the way and were inspired in some way. And in any case, I wish you all the best of luck with your own endeavors. I've included my email address here at the bottom. It's a little hard to tell from the font, but there's only one underscore in the email. I posted that on the obelisk as well. So feel free to reach out to me if you'd like. And I really appreciate your listening to my talk and letting me take this trip down memory lane and bringing a little closure to a game that really brought me a lot of enjoyment back many years ago.
Must unmute to talk. Thank you so much. This was so great, so interesting, so much fun. I love that you did not lead with, hey, I make like space stuff. Just throw that in at the end. Whatever. So I think we have time for one or two questions. We've got a few. If you were to add a current pop culture reference into the game, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. The Simpsons comes to mind, except The Simpsons isn't current anymore. Uh, it's an excellent question. Maybe Seinfeld? That's not current either. I don't know. I'm sorry. I no longer have my finger on the pulse of modern culture.
Mood. We should point out, chat all agrees with me that your game dev advice, not dated at all, totally timeless and very important, and
Okay.
things we should go reread that slide a few times. Cool. I have another question. Who else was in the castle of those who came in second?
Oh, that's a great question. So a lot of the humor in Alphaman did not survive the test of time, like references to Dan Quayle. But in the Castle of Those Who Came in Second, the Chicago Cubs were all there, all nine of them, because at that time they had they were perennial losers. I think Mary Decker and Zola Budd, who had a bad incident at the Olympics. Zola knocked over Mary Decker, who was favored to win some running race, and so they didn't finish. And there were a couple more. I can't remember. They're really some of the least memorable characters in the game.
That's appropriate. Cool. Okay, and not a question. Just wanted to tell you that I played Alphaman as a 12-year-old in 2001 in Sydney, Australia, and it was the first roguelike I ever played, so thanks for bringing me here. That's from Nornagon.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Thank you so much. It's nice to hear those things and much appreciated. I think it's a good game for 12-year-olds.
I'm so sorry I missed it. I didn't know that you could play games when I was a kid. I mean, I was the wrong gender for being allowed to play games. That's another talk. So as you kind of sat alone in that tree, we know that you were inspired by Rogue, but do you have other inspirations?
Um, I let's see. I had been programming some little games that I could just play on my computer. I was sort of inspired by trying to really just create something that I could control. I mean, it's what all coders want to do. You want to, be able to think of an idea and sit down and make it work in your game. I mean, Rogue was what made me do the kind of turn-by-turn basis, and those other paper and pencil games, Scammer World and Metamorphosis Alpha, are what made me want to do the science fiction version of it. But beyond that, I didn't play a whole ton of computer games because they were, back in those days, computers were not as readily available as they are now.
Yeah, you talk about programming this thing for it can run without a math coprocessor. It's like, wow. Anyway, thanks again. This was fabulous. And if you
Thanks
want
so much.
to talk more, you will be in breakout room screen 4, which is my big fat orc wedding.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And yeah, thanks again. Thanks to all our speakers for this block.